This is what I saw when I first looked at the bike. This is what the engine block looked like after I got the engine out of the frame. Still a fair amount of crud. So the first thing I do is use the engine cleaner to get the grime and crud off the engine block. I usually use the foamy version of gunk to get the heavy deposits off. And then if there's a little bit of lighter deposits that need to be cleaned, I'll use the pump sprayer version to get all that off the block. So this is what I use to refinish the aluminum engine block. And I have a variety of hardness of scraping materials. For example, the hardest is a stainless steel brush and a green Scotch-Brite pad. And then the softer is a brass brush, and the really soft is a quad 0 or 0000 pad of steel wool. Now I usually start with the brass brush and the aluminum cleaner from Autosol and work that around and then clean it off using a blue shop towel to get as much of the black out of the aluminum casting as I can. And if it looks like the hard aluminum oxide deposits aren't coming loose, I'll use the Scotch-Brite pad on really big areas, or if I've got just a small area that's not working, I'll use the stainless steel brush to try to break up the deposits, and again using some of the aluminum cleaner. And after I get through getting those all out of there, I'll go back to the brass brush and aluminum cleaner, and then the steel wool is the final step. Now all of that work I wear rubber gloves because I don't want to get the aluminum cleaner or the grunge that I pick up out of the aluminum into my skin, and in particular when I use the brake cleaner I don't want to get that in my skin. So the process is working your way through, getting it to where you've got all the black out of the case, and then as the final step I use a brake cleaner and I spray that on and I wipe that off with a shop towel, clean one, until it comes off with very little black showing on the case. And if I don't see any black deposits after cleaning with the brake cleaner, I'm pretty much done. So as you can see, I go through a lot of blue shop towels, and then when I get down to the brake cleaner, it's just kind of a light amount of the black that's coming off, and that's when I know I've got the case pretty clean. So I flipped the engine around so that I could work on the left side of the block while it sits on my portable motorcycle lift. And I thought I'd show a little more detail about how the refinishing gets done. Now you'll see that there's a fair amount of oxidation in the case. And I pulled the top engine cover off. So you can see here there's a line where the top of the cover was, and there's a fair amount of oxide, particularly down low where the push rod tubes go in. You can see quite a bit of that along the case there. So that's what I'm going to work on, and I'll try to show a little more of the detail of how I get the oxide out of the aluminum. So I want to get some of that oil and grease off the top up there before I work on removing the oxide. So I'm using a little engine cleaner and degreaser and a couple of applications, and then I use my nylon brush and just kind of work away to sort of get all that goop out of there, and I'll wipe it down with my shop rag when I get done. There's also some down underneath the bell housing that I'll clean up too. So I've cleaned all around the block with the degreaser and the nylon brush. And in a couple of places where it was really caked on, I used the stainless brush just a little bit. But I've got all the oil and grease off the case, which is kind of important, because when I use the aluminum cleaner, it does a good job if there's no oil or grease in the way. So I'm kind of ready to get started now. Probably going to use the brass brush and the aluminum cleaner. And I'm going to work from the top down and see how much of that oxide I can get out of there. And hopefully it'll come loose pretty easily. Since I may use the steel wool, I put some blue shop towels into the pushrod tube holes and a shop rag into the oil filter holes, so I don't get a lot of steel flakes off the steel wool in there. So I'm going to start up at the top of the case and put a little bit of the aluminum cleaner on. And then I've got my brass brush and just start working it. Now, this surface here is machined and seals the cylinders, so I don't want to get on that with anything hard, particularly the stainless steel brush. So I try to avoid that, so I don't do any damage to that sealing surface. Okay, now I've got a clean shop towel. And I'll pull all the black goop out of here. And we'll see where we are. As you can see, you get quite a bit of it off with the shop towel. Now, it's a little better, but there's still, if you look closely, quite a few areas where there's still some oxide in the pores, so I'll keep working at it. So I've been working at it with the brass brush and the aluminum cleaner, and right in here there's still some spots of what I see as sort of hardened aluminum oxide. So I'm going to work on those with the small end of the brush and lean into it and see if I can get them out of there. Well, here's the result after working away. I think I've got the oxide pretty much out of there. Now the next step I'm going to do is take some steel wool and clean that whole top surface again with some aluminum cleaner, and then we'll see what we get when we're done with that. Okay, time to clean it up a little bit. Yeah, quite a lot of grunge coming up. Well, I think that's looking pretty good. And then for the last step, I'm just going to run a little bit of the brake cleaner on there and see what that does. I'm using a clean towel. And it's picking up quite a bit of black that's still on the surface. Now you can see there's quite a shine now on that part of the aluminum, and if I move down a little bit here on the bell housing, which I haven't cleaned, you can see that there's a much duller finish down here which I haven't cleaned yet when compared to the top portion of that bell housing. So that's basically the technique, and I'll just keep working away on the whole block until everything looks pretty good. Now, when I looked a little closer, I could still see a little bit of that oxide that was still in some of the pores. So I basically just went back and did what I've been doing one more time. And at this point, I think it's pretty good. I think I've got all the oxide pretty much out of it. So that's part of the secret, which is just keep chipping away at it and keep working it and repeating the brass brush and the steel wool with the aluminum cleaner, and then clean it up again with a little bit of brake cleaner and see where you are. And if you don't like where you are, go back and do it again. So I think I'm done. The blocks come out looking very close to original factory condition, and it certainly was grungy and grimy when I started. I also cleaned up the removable tube here that the rear engine stud goes through, and that came out looking pretty nice. And this is the right side of the case, and it's looking pretty good as well. So it's a major improvement from what the engine block looked like when I first saw the bike.